Welcome to Borderlines. Can you hear me? Hello. Okay, this is Borderline. Welcome. Just a little bit of an issue in the studio. That's all. Good afternoon. It's me again. Yes, Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. I said to somebody on Instagram. I said, when you join Borderlines, when you want to write your question, present your question, come correct. Yes, that's what I said. So because, we love them for conversations, but the two shows are not the same, are they? Indeed, they're not. And on Borderlines, we focus primarily on global issues. That's why we're called Borderlines, because it's the only show on radio in Nigeria that is dedicated to taking you beyond borders every week, all the time. So, my guest today is an absolute honor to have him with me. You can imagine he's incredibly busy right now. And that's the great thing about Borderlines. We're getting some very, very, very good guests. And we're thankful that they're making time for us. So my guest is the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, Mr. Michael Freeman. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. How are things over there? In Abuja, I know you're in Abuja. How are things over there?
In Abuja, things are great.
Okay. We'll get straight to it. We have a lot to cover, as you can imagine. But firstly, let's do the human thing. How are your family in Israel?
So my family, my family are okay. My wife's family, her father lives in a town called Ashkelon in the south. He is okay, but his house was hit by a rocket. So his house has been severely damaged. So he's now had to move to the center of the country whilst his house until his house can be repaired. But other than that, in physically, everyone's okay.
Okay, great. Happy to hear that. Now, let's get down to it. We all know what happened on October the 7th. Initially, it was said 1,400 were killed and some 250, 300. Since then, Israel has since revised the number of those killed to 1,200. And there are still some 200 or so held in hostage. First question I'm going to ask you, can you confirm the actual number to us? How many are still in hostage with Hamas and how many are actually recorded as dead? And is that number still going to be changing?
So look, it sounds strange. How come we don't know how many people were killed and how many people were kidnapped and what's happened? And that really attests to the barbarity of what Hamas did on the 7th of October. They came in and they, as you know, they murdered our women and children. They butchered them, they raped them, they tortured them, and they burnt many of them alive. And the reason that we didn't know how many people died, because Hamas haven't told us how many people they kidnapped. We just know how many people were living and in the area. And we now believe that 240 people were kidnapped, including 38 children, including a 10-month-old baby, 3-year-old children. There's one girl who's 3 years old who both her parents were murdered. And then she was kidnapped into Gaza and is currently being held in Gaza. We have about 1,270 who were murdered. And the reason that number changed is because, and I know this is horrific, but it's important to know, we had so many body parts, limbs, and bits of bodies and heads and other things that were tortured and taken apart that we didn't know who they belonged to. And some of the people were so badly tortured and burnt alive that there is nothing left of the body. So we don't know whether they're being held as hostage, and we don't know if they are dead, and we don't know what's happened. So that's why the numbers keep changing, because of the brutality of what Hamas did and what's left of the bodies.
Right. Okay. We know that some bodies have actually been identified. There's been a lot of forensics going on. Hamas will tell you that they didn't rape anybody, and they didn't butcher. When you say rape, we know that the attack began about 6:30 or so our time, very early in the morning, and went on for some hours. The videos that I have seen, and I don't know if there are other videos, actually shows Hamas militants going into military military enclaves. We've seen the kibbutz. I saw the one at the festival, etc. How are you able to identify or to confirm that people were raped? And I know it seems a horrible question, but I've got to ask.
Look, I'll tell you how we know. We know for three different reasons. Number one is we have eyewitnesses. Some of the people who survived are telling their stories, and we have a woman who told her story who was at the festival, and she survived the festival, and she was hiding in the bushes, and she saw a woman being gang raped. One man after the other, after the other. The third man cut off the woman's breast while she was still alive and threw it around. They carried on raping her, then shot her in the head and still carried on raping her. And that's an eyewitness testimony. We have other testimonies from one of the kibbutzim in the south where they went into the room and the soldiers went in. And when they went in to go in there, they found a young girl of about 11 or 12 on the floor with her knickers pulled down, and you wanted the details, with semen on her back. We found another girl blooded also on the bed, about 13 years old, with blooded all around her genitals. We also have, the third thing is we have forensics. We have the forensics that have shown that there were some of the girls were so badly raped that their pelvises were broken. And we are collecting the evidence, and we will, there is no question, there is no doubt that Hamas raped. There is no doubt they tortured. There is no doubt they murdered. They burned people alive. There are some people who we are unable to identify. One 12-year-old girl who has been buried yesterday. I say buried, but there's nothing left of her. So the family had to bury her toys so that they had a grave. There is only bits of ash, and they managed to identify her from one small piece of ash that had her DNA in it. That's what Hamas did. And Hamas say they didn't do it, but Hamas lie. You know, let's be honest here. This is an organization that sent nearly 3,000 terrorists into Israel, and they raped and murdered and systematically killed. And on the most part, they were proud of it. Remember, they filmed themselves doing it. We have a film of 47 minutes, which we haven't shown to the public. We have only shown it to a select group of people. We haven't shown it yet in Nigeria, but the people who come in to see that film can't bring in cameras, can't bring in any recording. They have to sign a mental health release because the images in there, all collected from dashboard or from Hamas people on their GoPro, are so horrific and so violent and so vicious that we aren't prepared to show it to the public. People having their heads cut off whilst they're alive.
Okay, I'm aware of that 45 minutes, actually. It was reported in the Washington Times, I think, or the Washington Post, because some of the journalists were there. But I don't remember those details you mentioned. Let's go further. So, immediately, your Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, declared war. He said he's going to war with Hamas. But since then, what we've seen could be translated to war against civilians. What do you have to say to that?
Now, our war is against Hamas. Our war is absolutely not against the Palestinians. Our war is against Hamas, who have, since 2007, been in power in Gaza and have launched this vicious terror attack. And you know, what's amazing is that last week their leaders went on TV and they said to them, you know, do you want a ceasefire? And they said, of course we do, because if we have a ceasefire, we'll be able to get ready to do October the 7th again and again and again and again until we can annihilate Israel. We will not stop till we annihilate Israel and we kill every Jew. That's Hamas's own words. Hamas have got no interest in stopping. So we are doing everything we can that is reasonable, that more than any country has done to avoid civilian casualty. We have encouraged all of those people, Palestinians living in the north of Gaza, to move south. We've opened humanitarian corridors. We have protected them because we've seen Hamas have shot them and tried to kill them when they're moving south and tried to prevent them moving south. Sorry.
Start again. Did you say, because I didn't want to interrupt you, Firstly, but I do have to interrupt you. The
Absolutely.
Hamas spokesman that you mentioned, I did see that interview, and what he said was, "We will attack on the 7th, on the 8th, whatever." I do not remember him saying until we destroy Israel. But like I said, that's what I saw. The other thing is, I just need to clarify.
Hamas's charter, sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Hamas's charter specifically calls for the destruction of Israel and the death of every Jew. It's very clear. It's their main items in their.
Okay, I have seen their charter, but again, I don't remember reading that in the charter. But let's move on. I have actually gone to read their charter because I had to be prepared to interview him last week. Now, let's go back to what you were saying about from the north to the south. You said something which was, can you please repeat that?
Yes, so we've created a safe zone in the south of Gaza, in the south of the Gaza Strip, and we have created humanitarian corridors to allow from Palestinians to move, the Palestinian citizens, to move from the north to the south. Over 1 million Palestinians have done that. Now, we know that Hamas terrorists are also doing that, but we know they're moving south, some of the Hamas terrorists, but there's nothing we can do because we're not prepared to target civilians so that we can just maybe kill a terrorist or two. So we are allowing them to move south. We are encouraging them to move south. We are protecting them as they do so. And in the south, we are coming in is significant humanitarian aid. There's 1,700 trucks of aid that have already come in with water, with medicines, with food, with other basic needs for those people there. And today we've said we're going to allow fuel in, to allow fuel to power the water systems and the sewage systems and the other critical systems to allow for people to be using them.
Okay, let me read something out to you. There were leaflets, and I literally had to get this translated. There were leaflets that were dropped into Gaza. One of them read, "Urgent people of Gaza. Today, Hamas fired missiles towards our army, which was trying to open the road from north of Gaza towards the south so you can be safe. But Hamas wants to use you as human shields for themselves and their leaders." Again, despite the Israeli army will allow passage tomorrow between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on Salahuddin Road. For your safety, use this time to move south to the area of the south of the Gaza Valley. If you love yourselves and your beloved ones, then move south as instructed. Be aware that Hamas leaders are already carrying themselves. What does it mean the Hamas leaders are already carrying themselves? You've said you've provided a safe route. Now, we have reports, and it's everywhere. It's not even, I don't have to prove this to you, that even when they do move to the south, they are still getting bombed in the south. That's number one. Number two is, they're not just having to move to the south. So you say, okay, move to the south. There wasn't any transport provided. There wasn't anything. We have women, children, disabled, you name it, and men who are actually walking some 4 or 5 hours to the south, right? Doctors are reporting in the south that by the time they get there, a lot of the old people, they're dehydrated. A lot of them are hungry because, again, in Gaza, there's no food, there's no light, there's no water. Everything has been weaponized. What do you have to say to that?
Well, it's Hamas who've done the weaponizing. Hamas, as I said, have been in power since 2007. They're the ones controlling it. In that time, they have received billions and billions and billions of dollars of aid from the international community, as I'm sure you're aware. Ismail Haniyeh, who is the leader of Hamas, is now worth $5 billion because of the money he's stolen from Gaza. Underneath the ground in Gaza, I think your listeners should know this, there's over 500 kilometers of tunnels that they've built. To put that in comparison, the London Underground, and we all know the London Underground only has 400 kilometers of tunnels. The Paris Metro only has 250 kilometers of underground tunnels. Hamas have built 500 kilometers of underground tunnels. All the Hamas leaders have all the water they need, all the drink they need, all the food they need, all the fuel they need, They have everything because they have stolen it and they've taken it from the people of Gaza and kept it for themselves. So, we are asking them to move south because exactly what you're saying. In the south, there are doctors, there is water, there is food, there is medicine, and there is a safe space for them to be.
It is on record, and again, I have to go back to this. It is on record, and I'm not sure if it's Smotrich or one of the other members of the Netanyahu cabinet. He did say, there will not be light, there will not be electricity, there will not be water. He said this at the offset of the war. That's number one. Number two, when you say Hamas is the one doing this, Hamas hasn't had control. Israel has had control of Gaza since the 90s, right? Israel determines their light.
That's not true.
What is true? Then what is true?
So in 2005, I think it's important that everybody understands the timeline, because as you say, it's critical here. In 2005, Israel left the Gaza Strip. We took out every single soldier. We took out every single settler. The so-called settlements were removed. There was not a single person. And we left their greenhouses. We left all sorts of different opportunities for industry and for providing. There was an airport there that was built. There was a port that was built. And then in 2007, Hamas came to power. They killed significant numbers of Palestinians in order to take control. They threw people off rooftops. They absolutely carried out horrific atrocities. And they took control of Gaza. And since then, they used the airport and they used the port to fly in rockets and to carry out terrorist attacks. And so since 2007, we have had to make sure that we check what comes in. But again, let's remember, Hamas have fired over 9,000 rockets at Israeli towns and communities. These rockets are absolutely huge. They've managed to get the rockets in. They attacked us using SUVs and Jeeps and cars. They managed to get those in. They attacked us with hundreds and hundreds of rocket-propelled grenades, of bombs, of guns, of Kalashnikov. They managed to get all of that in. So when we say that they can't get things in, it's just not true. I personally went down to the border with Gaza, and I saw every day before all of this started, hundreds and hundreds of trucks going in with everything that was asked for by the Gazan people to go in. And all that's happened is Hamas have taken that and abused it and used it. So we have to remember what was going on there.
Okay, let's go back to it. 2006, you said Israel left Gaza and left, yes, after all the infrastructure, the ports, etc. But, Michael, it is on record that even though Israel may have physically left, they didn't infrastructurally leave. And Israel still had control over what happens in Gaza. The fact that Gazans, for instance, have to go through a gate. If I leave your house, I do not lock your gate. You still have the key to your gate. But that is not the case in Gaza, right? If I leave your house...
There's a border.
Permit me. Permit me. If I leave your house, I do not have access. When I get to my house, I do not have the mechanism to control your electricity. If I leave your house, I cannot go to the drainage that actually brings water to you and the water pipes, that the water tubs that you build, and pour concrete on it. I happen to know some of this because if you were in Gaza, but I can tell you without meaning to insert myself, so was my sister. So you see, some of these things she's seen physically.
So again, I think it's important. Again, you're raising points, and a lot of people don't necessarily know the numbers.
Okay,
Israel
go ahead.
provides only 50% of electricity is provided by Gaza by Israel. Of that 50%, it's provided in 10 overhead cables. That's how we get the electricity in. Hamas have cut down 9 of the 10 cables. 90% of those things because they fire rockets and move them up.
They fired when they started.
From before the war, they started.
Okay.
They started firing rockets, and we obviously couldn't go in to repair them. And Hamas have got no interest in repairing it. Of the water in Gaza, Israel only provides 9% of Gaza's water. The rest of it is provided by desalination plants and is provided by aquifers within the Gaza Strip. And the issue you referred to about the concreting of the well, these were wells that were being dug illegally and were poisoning the overall aquifer. If they weren't sealed up, then there would be no quality drinking water in the whole of Gaza. So it's important to know that 92% of all the water in Gaza comes from Gaza. It doesn't come from Israel. It never came from Israel. So from 2000, one of the questions we should ask ourselves is, when Israel left in 2005, and Hamas have been in control there since 2007, they've been in control for 16 years. In 16 years, they could have built electricity generators, they could have built more desalination plants, they could have built all sorts of different things, but they didn't, because they took the money and they used it to buy guns and to build rockets and to build a terror network and to build an underground tunnel system and to steal it for their leaders. So the question is, why have they done that, and why haven't they invested in the infrastructure of Gaza? And the reason is because Hamas don't care about the Palestinians. They've got no interest in the Palestinians. They use the Palestinians as a human shield. They don't care if they die. All they care about is killing Israelis and killing Jews.
Okay. We'll be right back. That's a good place to start. We'll be right back. We're going to take a 1-minute break. So grab some water if you need to, Michael. We'll be right back. Thank you, Lagos. Ambassador or Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, Mr. Michael Freeman. Michael, thank you for staying with us. You talked about Hamas and you talked about the things they could have been doing and why, etc., etc. And you said big terrorist, right? Now, let's take you back. Your minister and other members of your cabinet actually used to praise Hamas up until the 90s. Benjamin Netanyahu is on record for saying, if you want Gaza to work with Hamas, right? It is on record that Mohammed Yazin Israel worked with Mohammed Yazin. Otherwise, Mohammed Yazin, who is the founder of Hamas, would not have had money or, if you like, the license to go and open, to register Hamas. So why now is Israel pointing to Hamas, who they used to partner with? It's all, the records are there.
Well, I dispute the issue of whether or not we ever partnered with Hamas. I don't think we ever did. Israel has always designated Hamas as a terror organization.
I'm afraid that's not true, Michael. It's not true, Michael.
Well,
it is on record. I can give you the quote. It is on record where Netanyahu said he will work with Hamas is safe to work with. I will find the exact quote.
Please do, because in 1990s, what happened was in the 2000s, from the early 2000s, Hamas was using suicide bombings and blowing up on the streets of Israel in the 1990s and the 2000s. Hamas was murdering innocent women and children on buses, in cafes, everywhere they possibly could. And so Hamas, there's no question that Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's an extreme radical terror organization.
But let's talk about Israel's relationship with Hamas, because my assistant, my producer is trying to find that quote now, because I seem to have left it behind. Let's talk about Israel's former, if you like, call it former relationship with us. During the night when Yasser Arafat was working, who was low, as you know, was working towards the two-state solution. Israel was working with Hamas. That's on record.
But I don't believe that Israel with Hamas. 1993 had the Oslo Accords, and straight after that, Hamas started terror.
So why did the Oslo Accord break down? Why did the Oslo Accord break down?
Sorry?
Why did the Oslo Accord break down? Because we know Yasser Arafat we all remember the handshake, right? We know that he had the handshake with Yitzhak Rabin. We know Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, not by Hamas, not by a Palestinian, but by an Israeli. So what is it?
Well, as I'm sure you know, that in 2000, Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton and Ehud Barak, the then Prime Minister, went to Camp David, And on the table was according to Bill Clinton, not according to any Israeli or anything, Bill Clinton, Israel put on offer the entire Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and a division of Jerusalem to create a two-state solution. And Yasser Arafat said no. He rejected that offer. Again, Ehud Olmert, 2 years later, made an even more generous offer. And Yasser Arafat said no. So the reason that there's not been a Palestinian state is because Yasser Arafat said no, and he said no again. And so that's the reason there's no Palestinian state. We've made the offer. We keep making the offer. And straight after that, we had the second intifada, where Yasser Arafat allowed and encouraged people to come in to blow themselves up, terrorists to blow themselves up, to kill Israelis, to murder people on their buses, to murder them in the cafes, to murder them in the streets, to murder them at schools with suicide bombings and terror attacks.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the Oslo Accord fell apart because of the Palestinians, because of Yasser Arafat.
Look, I think there are many reasons, but the fundamental is that when Israel made an offer in 2000 and 2002 for a Palestinian state, Yasser Arafat rejected it, full stop.
Well, he didn't just reject it. I mean, we know that there were reasons why it was rejected. Okay, let's come back to today, because I will find that quote, and hopefully I'll get it before this interview is over. Let me read a letter to you. Dear Prime Minister, we, a group of cross-party parliamentarians, are writing to express our deep concern at the events unfolding in Israel and Gaza, and call on you to support a ceasefire, end the horrendous levels of killing of civilians, and chart a political path to lasting peace for the region. The call for a ceasefire is backed by multiple UN agencies, nearly 700 NGOs globally, Pope Francis, the Archbishop of Canterbury, more than 250 British lawyers, including eminent Jewish lawyers, 120 countries that voted in favor of the UN General Assembly motion, and the 76% of the British public. A ceasefire should not be an end goal in itself, but a chance to end the violence, ensure unfettered humanitarian assistance, get the hostages released, and begin the process for a new political reality for Gaza. The massive Israeli bombardment of the Gaza Strip, destruction of civilian infrastructure, and killing of over 11,000, I think we're probably close to 12,000 or so now, 11,000 Palestinians, including 4,630 children, raises significant concerns as to whether Israel is complying with international law. This must be investigated. The complete siege of Gaza, which is depriving over 2 million civilians, almost half of whom are children, of food, water, and fuel, as well as possible population transfer, are serious violations of international law and amount to war crimes. Hamas must be held accountable for the attack on 7th of October. These were war crimes for which the perpetrators must be brought to justice. The taking of hostages is also a war crime under the Geneva Convention, and we join you in demanding immediate and safe return of all hostages. Israel has the right under international law to defend itself in response to the terrorist attacks on 7th of October. However, whatever the provocation, even every nation is bound to comply with the rules of law. Why isn't Israel complying with the rules of law? By killing over 11,000 Palestinians, by taking down, you say, let me remind you again, your prime minister said we are at war with Hamas. Michael, you've told me on this interview, we are at war with Hamas. However, Israel has dropped more bombs in Gaza, and they did this in the first couple of weeks, than the Americans dropped in Afghanistan in all their times there. But even more so is that critical civic infrastructures are being taken down. Let's even put the hospitals at that side, because we'll talk about that. But schools, UN offices, residential buildings. How is that Hamas? You said they have 500 tunnels. But surely,
So
bombarding all the
let me answer
critical
you.
infrastructure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You've given me lots and lots of things. The first thing, let's
Yes.
address the issue of a ceasefire. Anybody who's calling for if you're these people who you read out in the letter, they don't give any way of returning the hostages. There are 240 hostages, including women and children and babies, old age pensioners, Holocaust survivors who are there. There's no way of bringing those hostages back because Hamas have got no interest in bringing them back. So just to say we need to have a ceasefire is not going to bring the hostages back. More than that, anybody who says let's have a ceasefire, Hamas have already said, and you quoted it yourself, that if there's a ceasefire, they'll use it to carry out on October 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, a million. Because what they want to do is use the ceasefire.
Well, I didn't say a million, but yeah.
If you carry on for the rest of the quote, they say a million or 1,000. I don't remember if it was 1,000 or a million. But yeah, the point is this. They carry on. They're quite open about what they want to do. Anybody who is saying that the answer is not giving us an answer to make sure that my children can sleep safely in their beds tonight, that Hamas is not going to come in and murder them and massacre them. The only way they can be safe, and we have not only a legal obligation, we have a moral obligation to stop Hamas being able to do this ever again. And so that's the problem with a ceasefire. If you are saying, I want a ceasefire, you are saying, I want Hamas to be able to do this again. I want Hamas to be in a place where they will carry this out again because they've said they're going to do it. They've said that's what they're going to use the ceasefire for, and that's what they intend to use the ceasefire for. And it doesn't bring back the hostages anyway. Now, in answer to your question about international law, firstly, Hamas, you seem to be incredibly well read and have done your research.
Thank you.
So
it's my job.
I'm sure you've seen the photos, and if you haven't seen the photos, I'll send you them, and the videos of the mosque with 50 rocket launchers inside the mosque, of the Scout Center with 30 rocket launchers inside the Scout Center, with the houses with the rockets. Yesterday we uncovered a house with rockets underneath the baby's bed, a baby or a child's bed with rockets underneath the bed. Okay, when we see all of this, it's clear that Hamas is using the civilian infrastructure. If I have a house, if I'm living in a house, and inside my house are 30 rockets that I fire at civilian populations, and I fire the rocket and then I carry on living in my house, and I fire another rocket and live in my house, is that house a house or is it a military target? And I would argue that if we phone up the residents and say to them, get out of your house, it's no longer a house, it's a military target, and those people leave their house, we have every right to destroy that house, to stop it being used to launch rockets on our civilians. My father-in-law's house was destroyed by one of those rockets fired from out of that room. And with the greatest of respect, I'm not going to stop defending our citizens because Hamas have put them inside somebody's house.
Okay.
Finally, regards to international law, international law is, and it's very important we get this, international law is very clear. Israel has a legal responsibility and in order to protect our civilians, to stop Hamas being able to do this again, and to target Hamas wherever we can, minimizing civilian deaths where possible. There has never been a war in history, where there hasn't been civilian deaths. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Every civilian death is a tragedy. I'm a father to 2 young children. The death of a Palestinian child is just as tragic as the death of an Israeli child. A Palestinian child is not worth less than an Israeli child. They're both worth exactly the same. They're both children. They both should have a better future. The difference is that we're doing everything we can to avoid killing civilians, and Hamas is doing everything they can to kill civilians. And it's a fundamental difference.
Okay. Israel is known. In fact, before I go that, let's still talk about this woman a little bit more. So, Hamas, we know, is in charge, is the governing, the democratically elected government in Gaza. The PLO or Fatah is democratically elected government in the West Bank. However, the killings hasn't just been in Gaza. It's also been in the West Bank. 200 or so people have been killed in the West Bank, right? With some almost 2,000 arrested. 3 times more raids has happened in the West Bank since October 7th, since President Netanyahu declared war on Hamas. But even you've said Hamas is in Gaza. So why then?
Well, Hamas are also in the West Bank.
Yeah,
we
but
saw yesterday.
Yeah, but
We saw yesterday an attempted terrorist attack in Jerusalem where 3 Hamas members came in with many guns, with bombs, with grenades, and they launched an attack, and it was stopped by our security forces as they tried to carry out another October 7th style attack on a Jewish community inside Jerusalem.
No, that was actually on the border. I remember
Hebron.
what happened
They
yesterday.
came from Hebron. They came from Hebron. They did not cut, and that's in the West Bank. So we are acting in the West Bank to arrest those Hamas terrorists who are planning terror attacks from within the West Bank as well. We are not operating in the same way that we are in Gaza, obviously not, because as you say, our war is with Hamas. And if somebody is bringing a gun or wants to kill me, I will arrest them or I will kill them before they kill me.
Yeah, but let's go back to the West Bank. The Israeli raid on the people, the residents in the occupied territories in Jerusalem has increased threefold, right? And
but so
even
attacks.
but hold on, no, but even before the 7th, there were all sorts of skirmishes going on. Now, let's take this. What you mentioned yesterday about the attack, it was on a border, I think, of Hebron, between Hebron and somewhere else. And
no,
it wasn't.
They came from Hebron. It was in Jerusalem. It was on the
in
border
Jerusalem.
of Jerusalem.
Right.
I know exactly where it was.
Right. Okay. But I think there were 3 people, and I think 1 Israeli was killed, and the Palestinians was killed. The fact that and I'm talking about the West Bank now, the fact that the people of the West Bank, if you like, for the sake of this conversation, are also being punished for the war that is supposed to be against Hamas. If it was, Michael, no, but they are, because if
how
the raids,
how are they being punished? We've arrested people we've arrested the leadership of Hamas. No one else. We aren't arresting anybody else.
2,000 people that you've arrested in the West Bank Hamas?
Remember,
are they all Hamas?
In Gaza, absolutely they're Hamas. They're either Hamas or Islamic Jihad. They are either Hamas or Islamic Jihad. That's who we are arresting. We're not arresting anybody else. That's who we're arresting. And we are doing it so that there isn't a war in the West Bank. Okay. So that there is quiet in the West Bank. Look, eventually, Israel and the Palestinians have to have peace. They are my neighbors. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to disappear, and I'm not going to disappear. And so we need to have, and I'm sure you want peace just as much as I want.
Absolutely.
Well, probably not. I probably want peace more than you because I live there. And that's just a...
No, I want peace anyway. I actually do want peace.
Absolutely.
Because I have friends who live in both parts.
Absolutely. So we all want peace in that area. Well, I can tell you, if Hamas stay there, there will never be peace. There can never be peace with somebody who cuts the heads off babies. Okay. There can never be the peace with people who mass rape. And therefore, we need to get rid of them. And when we get rid of them, there will be a better future for both Palestinians and Israelis. And I genuinely believe there will be an opportunity for peace at that point.
Okay. We'll talk about peace in more detail a little later. Israel is known for its superior, and I say that with all compliments, to having the most superior, sophisticated security system. Are we agreed on that? Right? Now,
we are, and I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going. So tell me 2 things. 1, with Israel's sophistication, to look for, and in this day and age of AI, and AI is part of the security apparatus that, sophistication security apparatus use. To be looking for Hamas in a small space that has 2 million plus people, 50% of whom are young people who have not voted for Hamas, and then having to kill over 11,000 and over 4,000 babies just to find Hamas. Would you say Israel's security is not sophisticated after all?
Well, I think our security is very sophisticated. I would also say that the numbers coming out of Gaza, we should be very, very wary of any numbers coming out of Gaza. There's no question.
Well, these numbers are from the UN, I'm afraid, not from Gaza. I'm not taking my
UN,
numbers from the Gaza. From Gaza.
But the UN have taken their numbers from the Gaza Health Ministry, which is Hamas. So the UN have taken their numbers from Hamas.
Okay, but I'm supposed to. But I'm supposed to take your numbers, though. If you tell me these are the numbers, if you give me numbers from Israel, I won't doubt you.
I'm saying to you, okay, well, first of all, the number of Israeli dead, we are open and we prove, and we're a democracy, and anybody can come in and you can go to the funerals and you can see the graves and you can do all of those things and you can see the bodies. That's not an issue. The issue about the Palestinians is, and again, not denying that civilians have died. But these numbers are being provided by Hamas. They're being provided by Hamas that we know lies. And I would give you one example. We know that, for example, at the Al-Alhi hospital, which was hit by the courtyard, was hit by a rocket. And Hamas immediately said Israel's blown it up and blown up the hospital. And a couple of hours later, it turned out it was actually an Islamic Jihad rocket that fell in the courtyard. The hospital was still perfectly okay, was standing, was fine. Hamas said 800 people were killed in this explosion. And that's 800 in their numbers of the 11,000. And yet all of the Western countries say they don't think more than 40 people were killed in this incident. And they were killed by a Palestinian rocket anyway. So, we have to take all of those numbers with a big pinch of salt. And I would say to you, I've no doubt that civilians are dying. Please don't get me wrong. I have no doubt that civilians are dying. But, on all these numbers, you notice that of the numbers they're giving, they don't seem to mention how many terrorists have died. They don't seem to mention the number of Hamas fighters that have died. We know that at least 4,000 Hamas fighters have died because we've counted them as they've been killed.
But is that
and
released?
Doesn't include many others.
Okay, has that number been released?
We haven't really full breakdown yet because we're still in the middle of a war. But we will do. We know that over 1,200 of them were murdered. Were the ones who murdered our civilians. 1,200 of them are dead inside Israel. So we know that for sure. The numbers are there. But look, again, the question isn't. It's very easy for us to play the numbers game, but the numbers doesn't always tell you the whole story. In the Second World War, many more Germans died than British and Americans combined. That doesn't mean that the Nazis were right. That doesn't mean that the Nazis were the innocent ones. It doesn't mean that they did that. So we always have to remember that numbers don't tell a story in itself. And I wish we could have less civilian casualties. But you have to ask yourself, when Hamas put themselves inside buildings, inside schools, inside hospitals, inside mosques, inside playgrounds, then unfortunately civilians will be killed. And here's the important thing, if we as the world say to Hamas or to any other terror organization, if it's Boko Haram or it's ISWAP or it's any other terror organization in the world, if you hide in a hospital or you hide in a mosque or you hide in a playground or you hide in a house, you will not be attacked. You will be safe, because that would be the most terrible message to give to terrorists, because we could say to terrorists, you can come, you can kill, then go back and sit in a school and you can get away with it completely. You can come, you can murder, sit in a mosque and you'll be absolutely free. And no one can accept that if we want to have a better world for our future.
Indeed, the Americans didn't want to accept that, but they didn't drop 6,000 bombs on Afghanistan. Let me come back to my other question. The hospitals, you mentioned the hospitals. Al-Shifa Hospital. Why Al-Shifa Hospital?
Well, since 2014, and again, this is not my information, this you'll see from many other people around the world. Since 2014, we know that Hamas have been using the Al-Shifa complex, even Amnesty International, by the way, in their reports in 2015, I believe, and I need to get the exact year, said that Al-Shifa Hospital was being used to the complex, one of the buildings in the Al-Shifa complex was being used to torture Palestinians by Hamas. Al-Shifa is not just a hospital. It is also one of the command and control centers of Hamas. We went in there yesterday. We have shown Kalashnikovs, we've shown grenades, we've shown a car full of enough explosives and other material enough to take over a small town that was in there, a booby-trapped car. We have found evidence that hostages were being there. Right next to the Shifa hospital, we have recovered the bodies of 2 Israeli hostages that were murdered by Hamas. So Al-Shifa Hospital is not just a hospital. It's been used as a command and control center by Hamas. We found an entrance to a tunnel there. And I think in the coming days, there'll be even more information that will be released, which will prove beyond a doubt what Al-Shifa Hospital really is.
Experts, and I remember the video. I've seen the video with one of your senior military people, showing, and even on Israeli television, they have said Israel is gonna have to do better than this if they want us to believe, and I'm paraphrasing, by the way, if they want us to believe that Al-Shifa is being used. There's one of the words that was used was Kalashnikov. Rusty, that's the word, Rusty Kalashnikov. I saw that video. I saw it online. The first one, I saw it immediately because I do follow the IDF, right? The first
you
one.
saw the car as well. You saw obviously the white car, which was filled with explosives and filled with bombs and filled with Kalashnikovs and filled with huge amounts of materials. You saw the suicide vests. You saw large amounts.
Yeah, but permit me to finish, Michael. So I saw the video. The first one that was posted, I saw it. And then second, that one was deleted. And then the second one was then reposted that had been edited without, and I can't remember the exact words. But even if we go back to that, Al-Shifa has been under siege, if you like, for the last 5, 7, 8 days. Okay? What the military officer showed yesterday literally couldn't have been what the sophisticated Israel could find to prove that Al-Shifa is a Hamas, was a central operation center, is what Israel calls it.
It's one command center, and again, I think we should be patient. Israel doesn't release all of its intelligence immediately. Remember, there are 240 hostages. Israeli hostages that are being held in Gaza, and we have reason to believe that Al-Shifa was connected to those hostages. And whilst we're still looking for hostages, we're not going to provide information at this point that could endanger the lives of hostages that are being held. But I think we should wait a couple of days, and I think you're going to see intelligence and information that will show beyond doubt. And again,
7,000 people, Michael. 7,000 people in Al-Shifa are still being held in there. We're going to come back. Sorry to interrupt you. We're going on a break. Sorry to interrupt. Please hold on to that. I'm so sorry. We're going on a quick break. We'll be right back. Michael, you've got to promise to come back to this show. Can you believe we've got a couple of minutes left? Let's talk, please.
I promise I'll come back. I promise
Thank you.
Whenever you want me, I'm willing to come back as early as early next week.
Thank you. Let's talk peace. Is Israel ready for a two-state solution? Where is this going to end? And at what point is Israel going to accept a ceasefire? You said you don't want people to die. Nobody wants people to die. But people are dying. People dying are Palestinians, like you, like me, who have blood running through their veins. When is this going to stop?
Well, if Hamas release all the hostages and they surrender, it'll stop tomorrow morning.
So it's an if. But there are 6,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons.
These are people. There are 6,000 people. But if I walk up, if I murder somebody in the street, if I shoot 5 people in a cafe, or I shoot a child at a bus stop, or I stab somebody in the street, surely that person should be in prison. These are who the 6,000 people are in Israeli prisons. They've all been on trial. They've all been convicted in a court of terror activities. So to compare somebody, how do you compare somebody who's shot somebody and is a terrorist to a 9-month
most of
baby
them
who's
have not
being
been.
held by Hamas?
Most of them have not stood trial. Surely is innocent until proven guilty.
They have been tried
in an Israeli court.
Yes.
Did they have access to a lawyer? Because
absolutely,
apparently most of them do not.
That's not true. They all have everybody who comes to a court in Israel has access to a lawyer.
Okay. Well, I've got to come back. I've got so many questions, and I can't, like I said, I can't believe Ron literally got about a minute left. The late UN resolution. Why did Israel say they're not going to be a part of it?
As I said to you, we want our hostage back.
So it's a condition. So people continue to be killed until the hostages are. Don't get me wrong, and that doesn't mean they shouldn't be returned. But that's effectively what I'm hearing from you. That Israel will continue to bomb Gaza, to tell dozens to move to this.
We're not bombarding. Israel. I'll put it like this. So it's very clear. Israel will continue to act to degrade Hamas's ability and target the Hamas leadership and military infrastructure until they can no longer carry out another October 7th and until we get our hostages. If tomorrow morning Hamas return hostages and surrender, it's all over. This is not something that we can ever accept. No one can accept it. No one can accept on the borders a terror organization like Hamas. We want peace. We want a better future, but there can't be one with a genocidal, barbaric, torturing or terror organization such as Hamas on your borders. I have to stop them because they're going to kill again.
Right. So let me end with this because I have another guest immediately after yours. One of the, I'm trying to remember his name. I was speaking. One of the senior UN representatives yesterday said, "Do not be driven by rage." Again, I paraphrase him. He said he was pleased and he said, "Do not be driven by rage." What I'm hearing from you is a lot of rage. What the world heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu was a lot of rage. Right? Now, of course, the immediacy of pain and all of that is understandable. But we're some 42 days on and we can still hear that rage.
So
Michael.
We're not driven by rage. Obviously, we were angry, but we're more shattered as by this murder, and we need to make sure that it doesn't happen again. It's not rage. Okay. It is absolutely not rage. It is cool. It is rational. It is. Let's carry on the conversation next week. I do want to see better days, and we've still got lots of things we didn't cover.
Yeah,
I believe that these conversations are healthy and positive, and we need to be able to explain and understand. Yeah. And I look forward to changing questions.
Yeah,
but I do believe that days are ahead of us.
Thank you very much, Michael Freeman, Israeli ambassador to Nigeria. Thank you for joining me on Borderlines.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Okay. You can send your WhatsApp messages to us on 0809-597-5805. On Facebook and YouTube, we're on Nigeria Info 99.3. On Twitter, we're on Nigeria Info FM. On Instagram and Threads, we are on Nigeria Info F Lagos. You probably hear me smiling right now because my next guest is somebody that I still look forward to meeting in person. Okay, he's literally he's one of the voices that you must listen to, irrespective of what side you're on, and I mean that with the absolute sincerity. Whether you're on, the Palestinian side, whether you're on the Israeli side, if you do not take time out to go and Google and read up on Professor Ilan Pappe, as you say in Nigeria, you're on your own. Professor Pappe, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having you in your show. It's a great pleasure to be with you this evening.
The pleasure's mine. I became a nuisance on your WhatsApp, didn't I? Calling.
No, it was very welcome. It was very welcome.
Thank you. Gosh, I wish we could have you for 2 hours. Really, there's so much. There's so much I want to get out of you. But let's start from where we are now, perhaps then work backwards. Where were you when you heard of Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th?
Yeah, I was in Haifa. I teach in the UK, and I share my life half of the time in the UK and half of the time in the city of Haifa in the north of Israel. And when it happened, it was the time that I'm in Haifa. I was in Haifa, so I heard the news a bit later that morning. And like everyone else, of course, it took a long time to digest and understand what went on. And of course, the information in the first day too was also incomplete. So I waited a bit before even trying to say something, just to take in, to understand what went on. It was a big surprise, no doubt, for everyone concerned. Yes.
And we have to talk about the surprise because it brings me on to my next question. How was Hamas able to penetrate? You're also a political scientist, Lagos. Let me tell you, he's also a political scientist. How was Hamas able to penetrate the superior, sophisticated security apparatus that is Israel? How?
That's a very, very good question. There are now running two kinds of narratives, two kinds of explanation. The one that is still more likely, I think, is that the Israelis were very confident in their ability, quite misinformed about the capacity of the Hamas, of its determination, of the desperate situation in which people of Gaza were and were willing to take risks that probably very few people would have taken. So that's one narrative, and yet I must say that the more conspiracy, orientated, which says it was too easy, and why did the Israeli army waited 5 hours after the kibbutzim there, the settlements were taken? Why it waited 5 hours before it went in? I must say there are a lot of questions about it. Is it in between these two theories, namely that there was an intentional kind of wish by the current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is in deep trouble? May talk about it a bit later. In deep trouble, and he hoped maybe even if there were the signs that it would not be such a success, Hamas operation, and therefore, but enough to distract everyone in Israel from the internal kind of civil war that's going on there, a cold one, not a real civil war, but definitely a kind of a civil war from his own trouble of corruption and so on. And it went out of hand. He didn't expect this to be like this, but was not too worried by the signs or even not make the effort of moving enough troops that he preferred to put in the West Bank to defend. I don't know. I mean, it's too near, to the event itself. It was such a sophisticated fence with, all kind of electronic devices that even a bird touched that fence. Everybody knew about it. And you probably have seen, as I have, the clips, they went with an old tractor and just brought down that fence in more than one place. So really, I'm waiting, to be honest, and I hope that I'm not disappointing with my answer. I'm really waiting for more evidence to unfold, because there's too much that is there which is still suspicious and not easily explained rationally,
Mm-hmm.
Apart from the fact that definitely it was a daring operation by people who were caged for 15 years in a mega big prison, and they went out with all outrage and so on, and did what they did. Did they expect to be so successful? I also wonder. But that's, I think we'll have to wait with the judgment on that for a little bit more.
Okay. President Netanyahu declared war immediately, almost immediately. And he says, and I quote, they're at war with Hamas. My guest before you, who's ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to Nigeria, Michael Freeman, he also said, we are at war with Hamas. But since then, the declaration of that war, we've seen over 11,000 Palestinians killed, over 4,000 children, doctors, journalists, health workers, UN workers. Is there a war against Hamas or a war against the people?
No, I think it's a war on Gaza. In 2010, I published a book with Noam Chomsky called The War on Gaza. And we referred to a military operation in 2009, which we thought was horrific because it ended with so many civilian casualties in Gaza and mass destruction. Little did we know of how far the Israeli power of destruction can go. So no, I think there is part of what the Israelis are doing is retaliation against the Hamas. There's no doubt about it. But very quickly, it turned into a total war against the people of Gaza. And it's not only what we know is happening on the ground, it is the conversation that we hear that accompanies these operations from senior ministers in the government through senior media people. We hear the same language. We will wipe out Gaza. We will wipe out the Strip. We will get rid of it. So even the language does not only talk about the Hamas, and there's a total equation between the Hamas in the eyes of Israelis and whoever lives in Gaza. If you would have listened, as I have, to the kind of conversations one can hear on the Israeli radio and television, you can see a lot of ex-generals and experts and pundits say, well, the doctors of the Gaza Strip are complicit in what happened. The street vendors are complicit in what happened. And people even go as saying, the children would anyway grow into being terrorists. The atmosphere is, in one word, genociding the people of Gaza is still regarded within a reasonable, proportional reaction to the horrific things that did happen, of course, and I condemn them, on the 7th of October in the Israeli kibbutzim, that is the settlement, the development towns, and so on, for the first half day of the 7th of October on a Saturday.
The people of Gaza, you've called it a cage. Hamas is the democratically elected government in Gaza. However, the EU, the US, the UK, and a couple of others have actually prescribed Hamas as a terrorist organization. Is Hamas a terrorist organization, in your opinion, Professor?
This is such a good question, because in my own university, I'm facing some legal proceedings and so on, because I wrote an article which claimed that the framing of Hamas, either by Britain or anyone else, as a terrorist organization is a very shallow, very reductionist and misunderstanding of what the Hamas is. The reason I am a bit in trouble there, and that's okay, is that I'm also a law-abiding citizen of Britain. So if the law says Hamas is a terrorist organization, I'm not going to violate the law. However, as I explained, and I hope that they will accept it, I'm one of the world experts on Hamas. And nobody consulted me in the British government before they took that decision. It was a directive from Israel to include Hamas in the list of terrorist organizations. Had they come not only to me, I mean, I'm not the only, there's some of us who really are experts on the topic, who have studied it and researched it for 15, 20 years as professional academics. And we would have told the government, the Hamas is part of the Palestinian Liberation Movement. And the Palestinian Liberation Movement always had both a religious and a secular side to it. So the Hamas is the more religious part of that liberation movement. And it is therefore definitely, like so many liberation movements, we know it from the history of Africa, we know it from the history of other places, sometimes liberation movements do use terror, do use violence in their struggle for liberation. But also the colonialist states and also Israel is using terror. So nobody can take the high moral ground on terrorism is here. But using terror or using armed struggle or using diplomatic means are all part of the arsenal that the liberation movement has if it feels that its people are under the danger of being destroyed, that they are being killed on a daily basis in the West Bank, that they are strangulated and starved in the Gaza Strip, that they are discriminated against as citizens of Israel, and if they are refugees who are not allowed to return. So if you take this into account, you can see why the Secretary General of the United Nations said you have to take this into within an historical context. And that historical context also refers to the Hamas. What is the Hamas? Why was it created? What does it represent? Defining it as a terrorist organization means that it just uses terror for the sake of terror. No, it is part of the Palestinian attempt to change a reality of colonization, oppression, ghettoization, and I'm very at peace with myself. I never shun from condemning also an anti-colonialist movement when it commits crimes against war crimes. I just want this to be the prism through which we examine everyone. And finally, I would say the Hamas's violence is not the source of violence. It's the symptom of violence. The source of violence goes back in history to a Jewish, which is a tragedy, a movement of Jewish refugees that were kicked out of Europe and decided to colonize someone else's homeland. That's very tragic. And that tragedy created the violence of the settlers, the Jewish settlers, and the counter-violence of the anti-colonialist Palestinian movement. This is the framework. Anything else is really playing into the hands of the Israelis and will perpetuate the violence. Instead of saying there is here a situation of oppression, colonization, let's involve everyone, the Hamas, the Fatah, the Palestinians in Israel, the Palestinian refugees, and the Israelis. And let's sit together and think, is this the only possible way of sharing the land of Palestine or other better, peaceful alternatives?
Let's talk about, I still want us to go back because I'm glad you've gone back to the history. Zionism. Zionism you've referred to as a racist ideology. You've talked about liberal Zionists and right-wing Zionists. You've talked about liberal Zionists like Mappam, who actually, you could call them, I don't know, hypocritical Zionists, perhaps, maybe. talk to us, because I have lots of people listening who actually do not know the difference between Zionism, Jewish, the religion, Jewish, the people, and the fact that Zionist values are not necessarily Jewish values. Talk to us about that, please, sir.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're asking it. I would just preface it by saying that one of the problems when people say to you, let's say, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, you can never answer these questions with a soundbite. You really need some time to explain exactly the differences that you're talking about. Zionism began as a movement of Jews in Central and Eastern Europe who were looking for a way to run away from Zionism, which really reached its peak during the Holocaust of the Jews of Europe. But there were also a movement that wanted to redefine Judaism as a nationalism, not as a religion. All this is very fine. People have the right, first of all, of course, to escape extinction, and they have the right to define themselves as they wish. However, the moment they decided that the best way to feel safe and to turn Judaism from a religion to nationalism would be in Palestine, a place already inhabited by another people, they became what we call in the literature a settler colonial movement. Very similar to the white people who came to North America and created the United States and Canada and encountered the native people of North America, and we know what they did to them. They genocided them. This is the tragedy of this encounter. Now, the moment the settlers received support from the British Empire, they were able to set a foot in Palestine, to build an infrastructure for a state. And when they had the power in 1948, they did what all settler colonial movements did in history. They tried to get rid of the native population. And they only partly succeeded in this. They expelled half of Palestine's population in 1948, but half of the Palestinian population still remained in historical Palestine. And even after 1967, when Israel occupied whichever parts of Palestine it did not occupy in 1948, namely the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, still the presence of millions of Palestinians is a problem for a national movement that believes that the whole country has to be Jewish and only Jewish. So what do you do with millions of people? So sometimes you enclave them, like they did in Gaza and in parts of the West Bank. Sometimes you expel them on a daily basis. This is where it's racism. I'm not saying that from the very beginning that's racism. But you know, when the African members, include Nigeria, by the way, when the African member states in 1975 debated in the United Nations whether they should submit a resolution that equates Zionism with racism, they already understood, because this was already 1975, they already understood that the colonization of Palestine is only possible because the Zionist movement and the state of Israel dehumanizes the Palestinians. They not see them as equal people, human beings. And that's why, despite the good relationship that some of the African states had with Israel on development and agriculture and so on, nonetheless, they understood that at the time when they were condemning South Africa for its apartheid system, they saw the same thing happening, and even in many ways worse, happening inside Israel. So that's one point. The second point I want to say is that there's always a difference between religion, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, which is a matter of faith, which has its own, sacred books and whatever goes with either a monotheistic religion or even a religion like Hinduism. And there's a difference between that and ideology. Zionism is ideology, it's not a religion. The Jewish faith is religion. And this is why, if I look back, let's say Zionism already exists, I would say 140 years. If I look back at the 140 years of existence of the Zionist movement, I can tell you confidently as a researcher, there are many Jews who are not Zionists, and there are many non-Jews who are Zionists. So that tells you it's a matter whether do you subscribe to the ideology of Zionism, and it doesn't matter, by the way, if you are Jewish or not. What matters is, do you accept the idea that the land of Palestine is the land of Israel, and that the Palestinians have less rights than the Israelis, and that the Israelis have a right to impose a nation state, a Jewish nation state all over Palestine, and make sure that the Palestinians do not have a role in deciding their fate in that state that the Zionist movement built. I think that is very, 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 very important. I always say the difference, if someone criticizes a religion, it criticizes people for who they are, which is racism. If someone criticizes an ideological act, they criticize the person for what he did, not for who he is, for what he does. And that's allowed, and that is important, because it doesn't matter what is your gender or religion. If you are kicking me out of my home, if you're not allowing me to return, if you cage me in a ghetto, if you're killing my family members, you're destroying, demolishing my houses, you allow settlers to burn my fields, if you're doing all that, then I'm against your ideology. I don't even care what is your religion. I care what you do in the name of the ideology that you are saying is inspired by your religion. But we know, like the Islamic State, I'm a Jew. I don't think that doing all these things to the Palestinian is Jewish in my mind. I think it's anti-Jewish. It's totally anti-Jewish to my mind to, to expel people, to demolish their houses, to ghettoize them, to colonize them. For me, this is not Judaism. I don't think this is the message of Judaism to the world. I'm much more aligned to people who understand Judaism as something that forces them to be at the spearhead of movement against the abolition of slavery, for the rights of African Americans, against imperialism. I mean, that's for me is the Jewish legacy, not creating Judaism as a powerful racist nationalism that directs all its force and power against the Palestinian people.
Thank you so much, Prof. Let's go back to the Palestinians, and you've used the word genocide many, many times in your lectures, in your interviews and conversations, etc. Israel demanded, or at least dropped a piece of paper instructing the Palestinians to move from the north to the south, that they were going to be bombing in the north, and they did, or they were going to be starting ground attacks. And then the Palestinians moved to the south, and they still continue to bomb them. In addition to that, we've seen arrests, we've seen over 200 killed at the West Bank. I remember seeing a conversation with you, and I think it was on Democracy Now!, where the word Nakba was used. And they said, is this a second Nakba? And you said, no, the Nakba never stopped. And you also said, this is, a slow genocide. Talk to us about that, please, sir.
Yes, I actually used the term incremental genocide.
Incremental genocide, thank you.
And for me, I admit, I'm not an international jurist, so I don't claim to understand international law better than any other person compared to the experts of international law. But I'm a political sociologist and scientist, and I read very carefully the definitions of genocide. And it's very clear that if people are targeted because of who they are, not because of what they did, because of who they are, and they are targeted in a way that can either directly lead to the death, namely they are killed, or indirectly can lead to the death. Let's say they're not getting enough food. Let's say that they don't have the facilities in a hospital to treat them, and therefore they die in the hospital. Or they are being traumatized to such a level that actually they are, walking dead people. If I look at the Israeli policies, in particular since 1967 in the West Bank, and in the Gaza Strip in particular since 2006, where Israel determined what kind of food goes in, who can go in, who can go out. So first of all, even before the 7th of October, and the United Nations said it in a very important 2020 report, people in Gaza were doomed to starve. And an incremental genocide means that you can still stop it. It's not. We're not talking about after it happened. We're talking while it's happening, and hopefully you can stop it. The similar thing is happening now in Gaza. What really matters is not this Israeli narrative. We told people to go to the north, and if to the south. I'm sorry, and if they are in the south, they are safe. One fact is not changing since the 7th of October. Every 10 minutes, a Palestinian child is being killed by the Israeli army. So what is it? Children are not fighters. Children are not part of the army of your enemy. If you are so careful with human with civilian casualties, how do you explain that statistics? The only explanation is you don't care. You don't really care. It's one thing to have a propaganda that says you care, but what matters to us is what is really happening. Now, I think that the numbers, when you talk about numbers like 11,000 and 12,000, maybe that's very important for listeners in Nigeria to understand. I say to you as an historian, never look only at the absolute number.
Right.
Look at the relative number. Think about a nation that would have 50 million. How many would be 11,000 if the nation, be 50 million?
Yeah.
That would kind of amount to 1.5 million people dead. This is really, if you look at it in relative terms, you understand that this is massive killing of people. And there is no other, entry in our vocabulary to describe what human beings are doing to other human beings than the word, genocide. And I still think that there is still time to stop it from becoming worse. All you need is a vote which didn't happen in the British Parliament, a vote in the American Congress that didn't happen. These two countries, which carry a lot of responsibility for what happened in Palestine over the years, the fact that the majority of the parliamentarians in Britain and in the United States voted against a ceasefire. They voted against the idea that this massive killing would stop, is beyond my comprehension. I don't know how they sleep at night.
Indeed.
After taking such a decision. And their decision is important because it's not symbolic. If they made that decision, there would have been a ceasefire. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's different. Yeah. If the parliament in Nigeria votes for a ceasefire or not, it will not affect, unfortunately, the reality on the ground. But if the British Parliament and the American Congress vote on ceasefire, then there will be a ceasefire.
Yes, indeed. Especially given that Balfour was British himself and they caused half of the problem. So
absolutely.
I have a question from one of my listeners, and I know some of you are trying to call. I don't have Prof for long, so please just send your messages to our WhatsApp number. Says, good evening.
I hope to be able to come again.
I
know
so
I only gave you 45 minutes today, but I'm very happy to come again when I'm less squeezed for time. I'm sure we can do that as well.
Thank you so much. We'll be holding you to that. 2 hours next time. I have a question here. Good evening, Siserge. Please ask your guest this question. Where was Israel occupied as a nation during the Roman Empire, or does it mean Israel wasn't anywhere before 1948? We need to answer this. That's from Taiwo Inejigbo. Let me add on to that what I call the Jesus question. Right? In Nigeria, where it's a very, as you probably know, incredibly religious country. Okay, immediately certain pastors had already started to align with Israel because they had begun to tell their worshippers that Israel were the Israelites and they were the people of Jesus, etc., etc. I had Miko Peled here. Miko Peled broke that myth, but many still didn't believe him. And I know, and I know you wrote the book, The 10 Myths of Israel. Oh, Prof, I don't know how long you've got. I need you to answer that because I do have 2 more questions. The Jesus question, the Roman question, where was Israel? Why are they not the Israelites from the Bible? Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you. First of all, the whole idea that you can come to someone's homeland and claim that you used to live there 2,000 years ago, and therefore that homeland belongs to you, is beyond absurd. I mean, imagine if someone would come to your house in Lagos and knock at the middle of the night on your door and would say, "Excuse me, dear madam, I used to live here, or my family used to live here 2,000 years ago." And you would say, "What does this nutcase want from me?" And you will ask me politely to leave. And then I would come back with the police. And the police would say, he provided us with a book that says that 2,000 years, your house in Lagos belongs to him. And therefore, you have to give him at least half of the house. I mean, this is exactly the seriousness of that argument. It's beyond comprehension, really. We know little of what happened in history anyway, as real academics, as real scientists. We don't know. It's very difficult to reconstruct what happened in Nigeria 2,000 years ago, and very difficult to reconstruct what happened in Palestine 2,000 years ago. Academics who are archaeologists tell you that different kind of people, among them the Israelites, for different short periods, ruled what can be called the land of Palestine. The Israelite rule was one of the shortest, by the way, in the last 4,000 years. It was definitely was not the only one, and it was not the longest one. So many other people can claim the same claim. The Hittites, the Canaanites, I don't want to give all the names. Some of them, by the way, are in the Old Testament. You can see all these names. And therefore, this idea that this is at all relevant to what goes on today is ridiculous. Israel as a nation state is a modern invention. I explained why. I fully understand why Jews in Europe wanted a safe nation state. I said it's tragic that the place they chose was where someone else has lived. And not only that, they thought they had the right by force to expel those people. That's a tragedy. I don't care if someone tells me that where I live was once a family house of his or hers 2,000 years ago. If they just want to come and visit, even if they want to have a memorial, But if they tell me you have to leave your house because of that, I will kick their ass. I will not accept it. And I think that's the kind of fabrication and mythology that doesn't help us to deal with the human suffering on both sides. Without resorting to this mythical nonsense that doesn't help anyone. Everybody can bring a god that would tell us that Palestine belongs to him. But these gods will not fight each other. We will fight each other because of that. And that's not a solution.
Yeah.
That's a mutual assured destruction.
Yeah. You were in the Israeli military, right? You also fought during the Arab-Israeli war, the Arab-Israel war. There's and please correct me if I'm wrong, but, I've read quite a bit on all of this, and especially testimonies. There's a trend. When I read testimonies from pro-Palestine Israelis, there's a trend that emerges. It's almost like they unburden or they purge themselves. Something happens that forces them to go on a journey of truth, to purge themselves of what some have described as indoctrination. Is that correct?
It's a very good description, because I know from my own case and cases from friends of mine who underwent a similar trajectory that this is a journey. Namely, there's no epiphany. There's no moment where suddenly you say, I was wrong, and you totally change your point of view. Because you come from a very indoctrinated society that is very sure of itself, of its moral justice, and so on. So it's a journey. And journeys can differ, but they have some similar things. One, I think it's important that I was born in a city of Haifa, which relatively to other cities in Israel and Palestine has a relatively mixed society of Arabs and Jews. So for me, Palestinians, if you want, were human beings from very early on, and that's very important. Secondly, I decided to do my studies outside of Israel, and it helps to get out of your indoctrination. I also decided to work with an Arab supervisor for my doctorate, and that also humanizes for you the Arab world, the Arab ideas, and above it all, the fact that I chose as an historian to look at the very important year of 48, at the Nakba of 48, revealed to me the evidence that showed me that what my Palestinian friends were telling me was far more closer to the truth than what I learned in school, heard at home, and heard from my professors in the university. So I definitely needed the journey. I needed to convince myself, but there's a moment where you cross the river. You cross the river, and you know there's no going back. And what I'll tell you when exactly you know that moment has arrived. When you say to yourself, I'm at peace with myself. I'm at peace with myself. I know that I have examined it from all possible angles. And I know I'm not a traitor, I'm not a liar, and I'm very loyal to my moral compass. And that's why I'm with the Palestinians, not because I'm a Palestinian and not because I'm an Israeli, because that's how I understand humanity and what humanity demands of you as a person.
Why the need for indoctrination, though? Why do Israel? I remember watching teenagers who talked about, and this was even American teenagers, and it would appear that a lot of Zionists or Zionist supporters or supporters of the Zionist ideology in Israel are even American returnees, as we will call them in Nigeria, Jewish American returnees. Yep. Why the need? Why does Israel, if it's so confident in itself as the chosen people, as belonging to a land, why the need for the indoctrination or for the Zionist indoctrination?
That's an excellent question. The answer to it is also the answer to the question, why such a powerful state still needs a lobby in the world to convince people that it has the right to exist. Nigeria doesn't have to go around the world and say we have the right to exist. Most countries in the world don't need a lobby to justify their existence. Israel does. Israel still does.
Yeah.
The reason is exactly this gap, this contradiction between who you claim you are and what you are doing. Without that indoctrination, there is a danger that young Israelis would think like I do. That's the danger. The danger is that I would say, wait a minute, yes, my family, most of my members of my family killed in the Holocaust, but that does not justify kicking out the Palestinians from my hometown in Haifa. Yes, the Jews need a safe place, but that doesn't justify killing teenagers in the West Bank. Now, the indoctrination ensures that these questions would not be asked, that the Palestinians, even if they are children, would be, framed as enemies who want to destroy you. In many ways, the continuation of those who wanted to destroy you in Europe. And that's why you need to sustain that indoctrination, because the reality on the ground keeps coming back to you and poses real questions of your claims. I just heard a conversation today in the street. I'm now in Haifa on the way to England. I couldn't believe my ears, but that explains how it works. When someone said to another person, I really was moved by the picture of all these babies taken out of the incubators because there's no electricity in Shifa Hospital in Gaza. And
people don't know where Haifa is. Please, sir, just tell us exactly where Haifa is.
Oh, Haifa is in the north of Israel.
Thank you.
30 kilometers from the border of Lebanon. Beautiful town. I hope you all can come and visit.
I will be seeing you soon.
and the only place where Arab and Jews really have a good relationship compared to many other parts. She said, one of the women there said, I don't care about these babies because they will all grow to be Hamas terrorists. That's what indoctrination does to you. It dehumanizes the human being. But if you dehumanize it, you start to question the kind of question that I put.
Indeed. I know you've got to go.
I
I'm
do,
so
I
looking
do.
at
I'm
the
so
time.
sorry.
Finally, what does peace, the framework peace, because you've been very good at pushing, the framework of genocide and Israel's behavior and history and the rights of the Palestinians. What is the framework of peace like for you? Right. I know we don't know when this is going to end, but how do you frame it? How would you frame it?
Yes, definitely. I'm part of a movement of Palestinians and Israelis called the One Democratic State campaign. We really believe that the only way forward is to make everyone an equal citizen between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean, not a two-state solution. One state, one democratic state, where everybody enjoys their rights, regardless of their gender, religion, ethnicity, and so on. A state that would allow the Palestinian refugees to return, a state that would abolish any institution that discriminates on the basis of religion or nationality. We believe that a lot of Palestinians that is their dream, to have normal life in a normal state. We know it will be difficult for Israeli Jews to give up their privileges. It was difficult for the whites in South Africa.
Indeed.
To give up their privileges, and therefore we need strong pressure from the outside. But these are, and with this I will end, these are the only two options. Either you have this win-win, as Angela Davis likes to say, this is the win-win situation. Everybody enjoys it. Or you go to the mutual assured destruction. Nobody is going to win if the conflict continues. Even if Israel has the strongest army in the world, it will still suffer setbacks as it did on the 7th of October in the future. And this will never end unless what most normal people crave for would be granted to whoever lives now in historical Palestine and whoever was expelled from there.
Professor Ilan Pappe, in fact, before I let you go, if I don't tell you that my friend Dr. Mukhtar Imam just messaged me to say, tell him I'm his #1 fan in Nigeria, he'll probably never talk to me again. So, Professor Ilan Pappe, historian, political scientist, activist, peace activist, thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on your
I will
program.
be in touch. My boss will be in touch. We need you.
I'm sure you
give
will
us
be.
a lecture.
Excellent. I'm looking forward.
Thank you, sir.
So
Wonderful
much.
evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
The headline news on 99.3.
Lagos, welcome back to Borderlines. We have 15 minutes left. I want to hear your comments. 0700 993 993. No, you already started ringing. You guys. Yes. Comments. Don't be aggressive. Don't be inhuman. Just talk. I'm going to try and give everybody 2 minutes. No, 1 minute each, because I know the lines are going crazy and we've only got like 12 minutes left. I'm coming to you now. Hello? Hello?
Hello, hey, Ireti Bakare.
Yes, good afternoon.
Done.
Thank you so much.
Well done.
Thank you.
I'm happy I got you from the beginning to the end.
Thank you.
Please, when next you
Your
have
name,
the professor,
please.
That is the last guest you had.
Okay.
When next you have him, I want you to ask him a question.
Oh, no, I won't remember. Oh. I won't remember, so save it.
You write it down. It's a very pertinent question. Some of the Arab Israeli and other Jewish Israeli who have dissenting opinion to what is happening right now in Gaza are treated as traitors. You're not asking, does he bother about that kind of terminology from the Netanyahu people? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello? Hello?
Hi, Sisioge. Good morning.
Good morning over to you. Good evening in Nigeria.
My I'm calling from Canada. I actually got the last part of the ambassador's interview, and the professor was actually part of it all the way. The question I really have is why because I have to stay as neutral as possible. Every day I tune in on television to watch what's happening there, and it's so heartbreaking. You understand? Why are the Palestinians, sorry, not the Palestinians, the Hamas people who claim to love their own people so much? How come they watch them?
How
die
come
like
what?
this?
I
Now,
can't hear you.
How come they watch their people die like this by still holding on to those people, the
To the
1,200
hostages.
people?
No,
Exactly.
they're holding on to
Because I think-
200, I think it's 230 or so now. Possibly, I can't remember the
Oh,
number.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. 1,002 was killed.
Yes.
1,002 people were killed.
Yeah.
And they have over 200 hostages. Sorry. Yeah, I should get my
No problem, no
figures
problem.
right. Now, my question was,
I need
why
you to
are they
hurry
holding
up.
those
You've
people?
got over 1 minute.
Oh yeah, they should leave those people so that the world cannot see that okay, they are not holding on to anybody. Then the whole world cannot stand behind Palestinians and say, "Look, Israel, leave these people alone."
Okay.
Because Israel,
Thank you,
Israelis are
Smart.
standing on those hostages to bombard them the more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smart. Thank you. Okay, I'm coming to your calls. Hello. Hello.
Hello, is this Nigeria Talk?
This is Nigeria Info. This is Borderlines. Yes.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm just calling. It's a call-in show, right?
Yes, please. What's your comment?
I'm calling to, first of all, congratulate the interviewer. She did an excellent job.
Okay, that was me.
And-
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I didn't.
It's okay. It's okay. Go ahead. Your comment. Go ahead. Can you hear me?
And then the connection is going.
Oh, I see.
I'm
Okay.
just saying that you did an excellent job, and thank you for pushing back on the ambassador who was just repeating points that we've all seen pushed back, we've all seen debunked.
Thank you.
He mentioned the hospital that they showed us an infographics which showed like there was a massive underground tunnel, but they just showed some Kalashnikovs, and he's still stuck to that. They're still holding on to their talking points.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for pushing back on it.
Thank you so much for calling. Thank you. Please make sure you listen
Thank
in
you.
next week. Thank you. Hello.
Your personal credit limit will be shortly.
Hello.
Hello?
Oh, turn your radio off, please. Hello.
Yes, Madam Sisioge.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. You have a minute. Your name, please.
Yes, the question I want to ask.
What's your name,
There was
please?
a question that was raised. And the question is, where was Israel, the Israelites, where were they before annexation of Gaza? Where were they
But
living or staying as, as an entity, as a country? Where can
There
you
was
please,
spread. I can answer that for you.
can you please do that?
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Let's hold on to that and I'll come back. Please stay listening and I'll answer it for you. Hello.
Good evening to Sisioge.
Good evening. Good evening. What's your name and where you calling
we
from?
call Ireti Bakare, the sweet voice on radio. You are
Okay.
on to Ben Felix from Ikorodu under this faded sun on this fabulous Freaky
Go
Friday.
on. You have a minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. In my opinion, if you look for my double, I give you double. And I want to ask the IDF commander to live by his word. Ground that gas strip to ordinary floor. I don't hear the horrible and horrific scene that they meted on Israelis. Ground that Gaza Strip to ordinary floor.
So
I don't
you
care
think they
who
should
goes
kill? Hold
down.
on. So you think they should continue to kill the
They should
Gazans?
continue bombardment, double it. Give them triple it.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. Can I?
Yes,
Okay. Can you hear me properly?
I'm listening.
Okay. If a terrorist was hiding, and I'm using this as an example, if somebody that's called a terrorist, a Boko Haram, let's say, was hiding in your house, All right.
It's not audible. I'm
Permit
not
me.
hearing you well.
I can hear you very well. I can hear you very well. Can you hear me? Can you hear
I'm
me?
listening. I'm listening.
Okay. Let's say a Boko Haram member was hiding in
The
your
Boko Haram in Nigeria.
but you have not listened to me. You have not. I can't have a shout match. We were supposed to be having a conversation, and I was going to give him more than 1 minute, but unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. I'm coming to your calls now. We have a couple of minutes. Hello.
Good evening, ma.
Good evening. Good evening, Koboko.
Koboko.
Go ahead. 1 minute. Go.
Yes. One, I want to ask you, why didn't Hamas release 200 people when they wrote Israel? Why did Hamas want to annihilate Israel? The former commander of Hamas said in 2005 that he wants to annihilate Israel. I thank God and pray for the children that died. But Israel should remember that Hamas are extinguished, What happened October 7th? Israel is highly condemnable. They entered through sea, through land, through air.
They didn't. No. They didn't enter through sea. Koboko. They didn't enter through sea. They didn't enter through the sea. They didn't enter through the sea, Coco, but thank you. Thank you. Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Rita, go ahead.
Yes.
Please, very quickly. Yes.
The reason I'm asking this is this. Because sometimes we just get this thing confused. If we said Hamas attack and maybe are hiding in the Palestinians, why don't they fish them out and try to leave their own place also? Because sometimes when we go to the north, you will see this Boko Haram hiding, using religion to hide under the guns. You won't even know the good ones and the bad ones. And
so what then do you do? Would you like the north to be bombarded? Would you literally, from going by what you said,
go by everybody. They go with religion. See, no.
What I'm saying to you is, based on what you're saying to me, what would you then like? You said sometimes you see them hiding behind the people. Would you then like for the government to bombard or to bomb those good people? Because here's the thing: Hamas is democratically elected, so it's a bit like, hold on, bear with me, we're so running out of time. It's a bit like it's literally like Lagos State governor is democratically elected, our president democratically elected, your governor is democratically elected. Hamas is a democratically elected governance in Gaza. So when people call and they say, why don't the Gazans push them out? You have to remember, it's like saying, why don't you say you don't want your governor and push your governor out? Can you do that?
See,
can you do that? Answer my question. Can you do that?
We can't do that. So the war
precisely. No. It doesn't. And this is why I'm saying to you, if from what you said there is a Boko Haram, sometimes in the north you see them hiding places. My question.
Not even hiding, sir. They will come publicly and tell you this. See, again, you are not over there and you don't know what we are facing, to be sincere with you.
Thank you.
I know what I'm facing, and that's why I'm seeing pain in me.
Thank you so much. There was a question was asked about, I can't answer any more of your calls, we're out of time. I know, borderline, right? It's brilliant. We go beyond borders. And I'm so glad more of you are getting engaged, are learning. And please spread the word every 4 o'clock till 6 o'clock. But let me answer that question. Quickly, Prof did answer it about the Israelis. Israelis were spread. They were in the diaspora. When we say diaspora, as in all over Europe, effectively it was Europe that began to actually discriminate against Jews. It was Europe that caused this, that started to discriminate against the Jews. So as you can imagine, as these people are discriminating against you, they were sending them from one country to another country. What eventually happened was their intelligences, their leaders started to think of something called Zionism, an ideology. But the thing with Zionism is it's all or nothing. It doesn't permit for anybody else. I've got to go. Girl, Yvonne, she's here. She's reading the 6 o'clock news. My name is Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. Borderlines, we take you beyond borders. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening.
99.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live